And we're back. Welcome to the Wild Rover. So I'm starting a new political podcast where I'm going to get mates together, people from all walks of life, maybe some minor political parties to have a drink, talk about current political issues happening in Australia or around the world, and see what we can come to, what we can find out, what we can learn, what we can have a yarn about, what we can have a laugh about, what we can fight about, all that sort of crap. So with me today, I've got one of my good mates, Wayne, on the left, battling another good mate, Jack, on the right, and we're here at the Wild Rover. Thanks to Wild Rover for having us and hosting us. Big fan of the Wild Rover, so if you're in Sydney, get the fuck amongst it, come down to the Wild Rover, tell them Dan sent you or the Pub Test sent you, and have a good time. So let's kick off. What I wanted to start with is Times Person of the Year. Greta Thunberg has been recently announced Times Person of the Year, and it's caused a little bit of contention with some of the world leaders. Not that she hasn't been causing that sort of contention for a while anyway. It seems to attract a lot of comments, bizarre comments from political leaders. And Wayne, what are your thoughts on the whole Greta Thunberg and what she's done over the past year or so since her lone protest at the Swedish Parliament?
Right, well, I think she's fairly inspiring. Inspiring for young kids, but also she's sending a message that a lot of people who've been educated in science, worked in science, have just had a head on their shoulders for the past 30 or 40 years. They've wanted to say this message, and now she's getting it out there. So it's not that she knows anything that anyone else doesn't know or anything like that. She's sort of a vessel for getting it to the media, getting it to the mass public out there.
Why has science failed to do that on its own up until now?
Oh wow, that's a big question. Scientists in general aren't very good at communication. Well, they're good at communication to each other, but not very good at salespeople. You don't really learn sales and marketing in a science degree. Also, to a certain extent, science is not common sense. It's not common sense at all. And when you go and study things like ecology, when I did the science degree 20 years ago, I realised in ecology, you'd read a paper and the outcome was always something completely random that you didn't expect. And there was all these other possibilities. And it was just so weird that would happen. And it made me realise that your common sense, based on your knowledge that you grew up with, is so, minute in its scope that the complexity of, especially the problems we know today, the complexity of our knowledge is so great that we just can't fathom it in some ways unless you're a specialist in the field. But also when I'd fight with people about climate change and things like that, I realised that they did science up to year 10, and then you've done an extra 5 years. There's no way that you can say things with the premise of what's in your head and then try and make them understand without going, hold on, let's spend the weekend and go through the carbon cycle, and let's go through, like, this is how biology works, this is how carbon gets fixated, this is why coal is old carbon, because it's been in the ground for thousands, millions of years. This is why trees that we burn now, that's new carbon, the sun's just fixated it within the recent era. So all of that is part, there's so much behind it. But to the average person, that doesn't matter. They don't give a fuck. Really, they just don't want to pay more for electricity. Do you get what I mean? And she's just trying to make people be compassionate and relate to something, and that's children. Like, everybody who's got kids can relate to that. You want to leave a better world for your kids, right?
Kinda, but at the same time, there's lots of people who have kids who don't seem to give a fuck about climate change and just kind of attack Greta personally.
Well, that's because also people don't like their worldview challenged. And so they'll latch on to these other facts, like alternate facts.
I was going to say, what other facts? Because I haven't heard much against Greta that's factually based. It's more personally based.
Well, it's not it's usually not factually based, and it's based on logical fallacies like cherry picking evidence. Just sort of like the one where like, oh, well, geologists say that in the past climate changed. Climate's changing now, therefore it's a natural phenomenon and it's not caused by any human interaction. But that doesn't take into account that things can have multiple causes. So there's a logical fallacy in their argument. Again, we should be teaching formal logic and critical thinking in schools so that people are able to see around that thing. But what ends up happening, they read Murdoch Press, who just goes, I'm going to latch on to that thing that sells papers, because those guys reading the footy are going to go, oh yeah, I agree with that, and I'm going to subscribe because it's telling me everything I want to hear, and it gets me angry sometimes, and I like that emotion. Do you get what I mean?
So the scientists have failed at communicating their message, and the climate deniers have been really, really good at prosecuting their message.
Yeah, but also you got climate denial think tanks that are like multinational corporations spending millions of dollars just working on publicity of like, how do we get it into like, how do we make your average person?
There must have been billions of dollars spent on science, you know.
Yeah, but that's spent on research. No one spends billions of dollars on going, here's my academic paper, come out and read it. Plus, it's also in a format that's difficult to read, and scientific journalists are fucking terrible. They fuck everything up. Once you know a bit and then you read like what their interpretation is, they always get it wrong. Even New Scientist half the time, well, I can't say that in all honesty. I haven't read it in a few years. But often I would find things in New Scientist and I'm like, that's not 100% correct. I'm sure they're better now if anybody's watching.
No one will be watching this first one. So Greta's really just the vessel for communication and getting people maybe to think a bit more about science and investigate more, is what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much, hopefully.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Jack?
There's a bit in there.
Do you need a drink?
No, all good. Well, actually, yeah, why not? Cheers,
boys.
Guys. Definitely, like looking at it from the perspective of science, I would say, in some ways, Greta, what's her credentials? I mean, you mentioned, Wayne, that
she cares.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. But as far as scientific credentials go, and you said, it's sort of hard when you speak to people and you realise, okay, well, they've only done science up until year 10. Now, if I'm not wrong, Greta's only sort of finishing year 10.
Yeah, right.
You might be year 11.
But she doesn't say, I have the answers. She says, listen to the experts who have the answers.
She's a mouthpiece. She's acting as a mouthpiece, which is fine. But then, I suppose the whole scientific argument is maybe separate from Greta as a source, or as not as an inspiration, because you could be inspired by someone who is acting as a mouthpiece.
But what is the scientific argument?
Well, we heard one side of it, I guess, to an extent. But without going into that first, I just want to say on Greta, look, I don't have a strong opinion either way, and I think it is bizarre that some world leaders who have a lot of important things on their plate feel the need to jump on Twitter or make commentary about a 16-year-old girl who's just doing something that she's passionate about. For me, it's don't you have better things to spend your time on? But at the same time, part of me feels sorry for her, because she hasn't finished high school and she's out there, spending her time. She could be furthering her education. She could be.
But she is furthering her education. She's furthering her education in public speaking, in PR.
Yeah,
you can't learn that at school.
Can I also ask, what's the point in furthering your education if you become an expert and no one listens to you?
Well, and that's what Wayne was saying, I guess. People aren't listening to the experts, so Greta is acting as a sort of a PR agency or a voice for these experts who have the info but don't have the means to sort of spread their opinion. I think if you become an expert, if you have education, you can give meaningful argument. Who do people listen to more? And sure, people might not listen to scientists, or scientists might not be good at communication.
Seems.
Yeah, probably. People that are popular.
Look, from a marketing perspective, why do we always have cricketers on TV? I look and I think, who is that guy? Like, why is he advertising a product? And you know why it is? It's because
It's
the
recognisable.
association, it's
Yeah.
recognisable.
Yeah, exactly. And in that sense, is Greta doing something? Is she worthy of Times Person of the Year? I don't even really know what that means, to be honest. Like,
I think
what is
the category, I think the
whole-
criteria for Times Person of the Year is just
Yeah.
someone who's had a major influence on the media over that course
So,
of the year.
so was it
Yeah,
last
right.
year or the year before that the Times Person of the Year was you?
thought it was next year.
I had no idea it was me.
I mean,
I've got a very small Instagram.
I mean, as
account.
in, it was
People.
you as content producers of the web. So it was.
As in everyone.
Yeah.
The human race.
Yeah, because we're out there making content. So
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And I think Trump was Times Person of the Year when he first got elected,
Was he?
wasn't he? I think so. I know he had a fake Time Person of the Year in his in one of his golf courses on the wall before he was actually made Time Person of the Year. But I'm pretty sure after his first year in term, they made him Time Person of the Year because he just created so much media focus,
right.
attention, content.
Well, he did, didn't he?
Yeah.
Right.
But
So
I'm
that's
pretty
the
sure the
criteria.
criteria, it isn't about so much what you've achieved and what you've done. I'm pretty sure it is based on
Yeah.
media exposure, I guess, and
Yeah,
media
right.
impact.
Sure. Yeah,
Which,
well, look, in that sense, she's certainly been a focal point of the last year.
Yeah.
Greta's challenging their worldview, what
Yeah,
they've grown
that's-
up with.
Well, I think people get to a certain age where, and this is natural for humans. You know, the grumpy old man syndrome. The I know what's right sort of thing. Even if you don't, it's just what you're used to.
Can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah, pretty much. And so she challenges their worldview in a way. Plus, they're thinking, who are you as a young girl
In
trying
what
to challenge me?
sense would you say that she challenges their worldview, though?
She's telling them that the way they live is wrong, and they need to change. And old people don't like to change. It's like why was Pauline Hanson so popular? Because she feeds into that, like, this is Australia and this is the way we do things. We don't like to change.
Don't you think part of it, though, is people don't like being told what to do or what they're doing is wrong?
Yeah, that's what I
That's
said.
what you're saying. Yeah, right. But yeah, she's telling them the way they live their life is wrong. And, I mean, that's a hard thing to take, right? To be told, especially...
So if you go to the doctor, and I don't smoke, but if you go to the doctor and you smoke and the doctor says you got cancer from smoking,
Yeah.
just go, okay, and you keep smoking.
Because, yeah.
Yeah, is it smart? No. Is it predictable? To an extent. I mean, if you're a really heavy smoker and the doctor says you've got to stop smoking today, do you stop smoking like that instant? Maybe.
Or as another example, if your partner's pregnant,
Yeah.
and she smokes, you know what happens? Usually, I'd imagine 99% of the time she stops smoking because the
hope
doctor
so.
tells her
but
if
that's-
you keep smoking.
That's different because if you read, the work of Robert Cialdini,
No.
the psychology of persuasion. So there's like 6 things that cause people to be persuaded, and pretty much marketers know this, and they can cause you to trigger little tape recordings of behaviour in your mind and get you to do things. And one of them is the appeal to authority. So of course, if you make anyone an authority, whether it's sports people like we were talking about in advertising or doctors, that's why you got people on TV selling toothpaste in a white coat or that, and they say we can't tell you he's a dentist or that, but people go, oh yeah, it's the appeal to authority. So
So the
whereas
problem
she doesn't
is,
have that.
Yeah, Greta doesn't seem to be an authority.
No.
And is that
Which I
part
find
of the
odd
reason why
because-
she's, I mean, tying back to
No,
the whole
but
boomer thing,
she
is that why
isn't
she's not
an authority on
liked or-
the voice of children, and that's the point here. That it's like that proverb that the world becomes great when men plant trees that they'll never
Yeah.
sit in the shade of.
Yeah.
It's that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, right. If I was, obviously, I've got a couple of boys. If they were Greta's age, she's 16 or 17, I'd be a little bit distressed if they have, and look, I don't know her, at all on a personal level, but just from what I read through the media and what I see and so on, when you see like her speech to the United Nations and like that angst and that fury and that, I would be distressed if that was, and I think Scott Morrison sort of talked about this, and he was saying, you know, he kind of talks to his daughters about climate change, and he doesn't want anyone feeling.
But he says it's okay.
Doesn't want anyone feeling.
It's okay because God's going to sort it out.
Well, I mean, yeah,
he does work in mysterious ways.
You just put this image in my head of Scott Morrison trying to talk to his kids about climate change. Sorry, I didn't mean to disrupt you.
That's fine, but I mean, yeah. Scott Morrison being topical and all.
Does he have his eyes closed and his hand in the air when he does it?
Possibly. Again, yeah.
What would you rather your kids be doing at 15, 16? Like at 15, 16, I was probably playing sport, getting drunk on the weekends and stuff. And
getting drunk.
You know, just being very thankful there wasn't such a thing as social media. I mean, I was looking up this YouTube that someone sent me the other day, because I don't know what the kids are into these days except for TikTok. But there's a YouTube that's based on going around finding the loosest city in Australia. So they just go around from town to town interviewing kids who are 14, 15, 16, getting fucked up on everything and talking about all the things their parents don't know. So would you rather your kids be out partying, getting fucked up, or actually doing something that they believe in between?
Well, no,
a little bit of getting fucked up and...
No, look, when they do, if you say like something they believe in, absolutely. Like, you know, you want your kids to be doing something that they believe in. At that age, do they know what they believe in necessarily? Do they know what they want to do with their future? Maybe, maybe not. I want them to...
But it's not fighting fires and stuff like that, so...
No, true, but... Look, I don't want them to be completely stressed out and worrying. I want them to be worrying about themselves in a selfish way. And then once you grow, once you mature, once you know, have your sense of self and your idea of the world around you. I mean, like at 21, like I was still flipping between different university degrees. I had no idea of what I wanted to do. Like, if I was out there which I kind of was, anyway. But yeah, like if you're not grounded, then.
But no one's saying that that's her soul. Like, we don't know her. That's not her. I'm sure she gets up in the morning and eats her Cocoa Pops and has a normal life and interests outside of this.
You're just worried that she's too stressed about this particular topic.
She, from the little bit that I know of her, or that I've seen of her, which obviously has all come through mainstream media sources, she seems to have a lot of angst, which I don't know is necessarily a very healthy thing for a young...
But shouldn't you have angst as a kid?
Yeah,
if you're a young kid, and especially if you look at the way Greta's being treated by, you know, supposed adults, I've got this, like, I find it really odd at the moment because the adults are treating her as if they're kids. She's acting like the adult. And I don't understand this. The way older people, they're not talking down to her. They're acting like kids. They're personal attacks, bullying. Like, this is schoolyard stuff. I mean, she's the one that's acting like the adult. And she should be concerned because she's part of a generation that's going to cop more shit from everything that we've left behind. To your point of the planting the trees, we're digging a hole and shitting on the fucking earth, you know, and that's what we're leaving to
you see generation. Conservatives in general always attack the person, never the message. They never like argue the point. They always like attack.
I don't understand why that resonates.
Ad hominem
the only thing I can guess is education.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I certainly wouldn't call myself a card-carrying conservative, but I think I've heard arguments or people on all sides of the spectrum, I would say, vary between having a nice logical... I've had university professors that I completely disagree with, but I very much respect the logical approach to an argument type thing. Whereas people that I agree with, but they just feel the need to completely belittle their opposition and ad hominem, like you say, well, like you say, it's reducing yourself to a childish level.
Absolutely, and you see that in the far left all the time, that they attack.
I think you see that in people in general, all sorts. Like, I don't know. That's necessarily. I think that's just people. a lot of people. I don't know that's
yeah, but we
indicative of
do
one
we do
side.
know through research that in general people of lower intellect are attracted to conservative ideologies because they simplify the world, the view of the world around them. At the same time, we also know people on the far left are a little bit. I can't remember what the research said, but a little.
I think if you go too far on any extreme, there's you're not balanced by definition, right? Because if you're balanced, you're somewhere in the middle, and so there's probably all sorts of weird, quirky behaviours and
That's what I don't get about Greta and this conversation, is because in the middle would be doing something, taking action, like applying logic, listening to scientists, listening to experts, and actually doing something.
Well,
and that's one of her messages, is like, she's not an expert, there's experts, there isn't a question, there's solution, the experts have provided solutions. The problem that she's talking about is none of these leaders who are busy attacking her personally are actually engaged in part of that solution, like listening to the science, like enacting the policies.
It's like Tony Abbott said in his conceding speech, that the Liberal Party has chosen economics over morality, and they've lost on that particular topic. He conceded that in his speech because that's what they've done. They've gone, oh, okay, as long as we get an economic surplus, it doesn't really matter about.
But that's a very short-term economic way to look at things as well.
And that's what they seem to do. Like just looking at what's happening for the next 3 years,
the
so
next
they can get
political
re-elected.
cycle.
Yeah.
I guess it's worked, and maybe that's the counter argument to Greta and climate change, is that in a country like Australia, where we're experiencing like the bushfires and stuff, we still elect the same sort of governments that don't give a damn about it.
Yeah, I think the bushfires is an interesting one, tying that into climate change. But before,
let's do that. Let's do that right now.
Let's have a look at that.
Let's look in the bushfires.
No, absolutely. But if we can, just before we, I guess, move to that, I think there would be an argument to say that Australia is in the middle ground. You say like, what's the middle? Like the middle is
getting rid of coal.
Right? Yeah, like but
even China's
disputed,
doing something. Like
China is pouring pollution into the atmosphere in record levels. Amazing! It's amazing. We were talking about this earlier with Vietnam and Korea and places that are just covered in the pollution that's pouring out of China type thing. I wouldn't say China's in the middle. I'd say they're on the lower end. I would say somewhere like New Zealand, right? Who's I forget what their pledge was, but was it 2025 or maybe 2030 that they were going to be like sort of completely carbon neutral? I'd say that's a little bit more to the pointier end. I'd say the middle is probably Australia, who, and that's probably up for debate.
But don't you think we missed an opportunity on renewables that could have been like an innovative industry
to export to the rest of the world?
Yeah, exactly. So we're not so reliant on mining and coal, because we're just in an economic downturn in China from a depression here, because we don't really innovate in our portfolio of what we produce. We've just got mining,
that's an interesting point.
A little bit of like...
So we were talking about China and China's responsibility and where they are on the middle ground of what they're doing for climate change or not.
Versus Australia, I guess. And look, to what you were saying, Wayne, about whether we've missed an opportunity with renewables and so on, I would say not necessarily, because I don't think that window's closed.
Absolutely, yeah. But setting the groundwork for the knowledge, because all of those guys who studied engineering in solar tech are probably in California somewhere now, like the whole brain drain, because we didn't set up and keep them here. And that happens in a lot of those sort of robotics, AI industries. Like, why would you stay here? We're giving less funding to the CSIRO, trying to put it onto private businesses when we're not really... It seemed like the Liberals talked a lot about innovation, but nothing really happened more than lip service to it.
They did have clean coal.
Yeah, but it's not really...
That's innovative. Scott Morrison brought in the chunk of coal to Parliament, the clean coal. I don't think his hands got dirty. And I'm not too sure if he took a bite out of it. I can't remember that.
Probably spread it with...
It was an onion. It was an onion.
That was Abbott had the onion. Scott Morrison, I would have loved to see him just big bite out of that coal. Clean coal. He was fine. He didn't die yet, unfortunately.
At the end of the day, coal's just trees, right?
Yeah, it's organic.
Organic coal. They should have called it organic clean coal. That would have been awesome.
But I mean, Yeah, like I don't think that we've missed
Well,
missed
we've
the
got
boat
10
completely.
we've got 10 to 11 years, don't we, before we miss the boat?
It depends who you listen to, right?
Science.
According to, science, the population bomb, the world was meant to end in the 1960s.
What?
What was his name? Ehrlich? Anyway, I
Yeah,
digress. But yeah, anyway, look, it depends. The thing is, some well-renowned scientist in the 1950s, I think.
Yeah, but the thing about science is,
his...
as soon as someone proves him wrong, then science evolves. So, like, I get what you mean.
Well, but that's the thing, right? And that's what you say. So, what was your time frame just then, Dan? You said
10 to 11 years.
10 to 11 years.
Yeah.
But what happens in 15 years when we're still here and it's all fine? Then it evolves. I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll still be here, but the
or-
point is about the amount of carbon that's in the atmosphere. We've got 10 to 11 years at this current rate to do something, considering we're not doing anything, we're not meeting the targets.
My main concerns is that people in cities, especially, don't go out and into around the world. They don't travel. A lot of Australian voters, probably like the US, don't travel. You're well travelled. I've scuba dived all around Asia, and I've seen it get worse. I remember when diving on the reef, a barrier reef in the 90s, and how beautiful and colourful it was. It was like insane fluoro colours everywhere, and now it's like brown and white with a few bits of colour everywhere. Yeah. People don't get to see that. They don't understand ocean acidification.
I don't like that side of things. I don't like the anecdotal evidence. I've got stories like that myself. Like where I live in Gordons Bay, and I've noticed over the past 5 to 6 years, all the fish have disappeared. Like, it used to be teeming with fish, but to me that's just anecdotal, and that doesn't really.
It is, but then you can go and look at the scientific papers based on ecological research.
Says this much is going to happen. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, it's so foreign to most voters that it's outside of their scope. Because again, that common sense, like their commonality of the bubble that they live in.
So, are we just too fucking stupid to do anything? That's what I'm hearing from you. Like, basically, the average person is just a dumb fuck.
They're not stupid.
And
they're
fed.
And
we're fed shit from the trough, and we're eating from that trough of shit, and we just can't. We can't grasp. We can't climb over that trough and reach for something greater.
To a certain extent,
we're dumb fucks.
They're not dumb. They're not dumb, and they're not
just
stupid.
not educated.
They're just ignorant to other things out there and other.
But we're being
views.
fed shit. We're being fed shit by certain medias like Murdoch media, and we're eating from it.
And that's why you see the Greens so angry in Parliament. Have you seen that Steve Hughes skit where his sister says, "Why are you so cynical?" And he says, "Imagine if you were sitting there and someone came up and served you some bread smeared in shit."
You mean McDonald's?
You say, "What the fuck is this?" And they'd say, "Well, that's your breakfast." And you go, "But it's fucking shit." And you start to get a bit angry about it. And they say, "Shut up and eat it." And you start to get more angry about it. That's what the fucking Greens in Parliament are doing. Because you can see them, they've read through the whole academic paper. They know the shit that's going on. They're not just listening to their staffer who got hired because they had the same worldview as the politician. And so, of course, you'd be angry because no one's fucking listening to them. Not that I support the Greens on all of their policies, but I understand where they're coming from.
Wouldn't you say, though, that for most people, at the end of the day, you're focused on your day-to-day?
Absolutely, yeah.
Your kids, your paycheck, your rent, your mortgage, whatever it might be, and that's sort of your main. So unless you
Big Brother or whatever else is on Channel 10 at the moment,
well,
that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's the other unfortunate side to it, But yeah, like. Unless you're seeing, if you talk about it like if you compare it to like the wartime effort, right? So I would say that it wouldn't be dissimilar to say some of the comparisons to climate change and so on. We're in an almost like emergency situation right now, right? Which is, and that's when.
But we're too comfortable.
Well,
we're in an emergency situation where we live too comfortable.
Perhaps not tangible enough for a lot of people. When there's planes flying overhead dropping bombs, then yes, you could say that, like the smoke haze that's descended on Sydney in the last few weeks is quite tangible, and there are people that are sort of freaking out and taking real action. How much is that related to climate change? Well, I don't know. We haven't really probed that yet, but anyway, I guess the point being, at the end of the day, we're creatures of habit and we're creatures of survival, and we just there's more important things for people.
So do you think we'll...
Absolutely, and that is exactly the point I was saying, is it's outside their scope of thought. Yeah.
So do you think we'll just fuck the planet and then we'll just find a way to survive?
No, you know what I imagine will happen? In 50 or 100 years, we'll pretty much extinct most of the species other than the crops we grow for our own agriculture. And most forests are gone. We got cities, and this alien species will come in and see how we interact with the living things. As I look at these natives, the custodians of the land, it's amazing how they are one with their ecology and they just interact with it perfectly. Because that will hit some sort of balance there.
I would actually think that aliens would come to us in 100 years and see how we've fucked the land and go, we don't need any resources here, it's fucked, and piss off. So we're actually like doing a good thing by fucking the earth now.
We would have refined it for them because we've already like...
If we've taken all the resources, destroyed everything, burnt, scorched the earth, they'd come here and go, look at that burnt piece of shit, keep it, and fuck off. So we're not going to be invaded by aliens in 100 years.
Possibly.
I think human beings are an incredibly innovative species, and I think we have, by definition, we've met every challenge that we've faced in the last whatever of our existence, and we're still here now. And look, it's I would say it's up for debate. You know, how much is our effects on the climate directly contributing to some of the effects that we're seeing?
But we've had like the fire chiefs come out that wanted to meet with Scott Morrison.
You mean in Australia or globally?
Globally.
Because I can get the papers for you that go through and do a literary summary of, and I think there's like 13,900 and something anyway, papers against like 37 that for and against. So I'm pretty sure the science is settled on it.
Settled on
anthropogenic climate change as like, so we've caused it. Now, whether or not climate change is causing the fires in Australia, to a certain extent, but I think it's also the New South Wales government cutting back more than 50% on funding to national parks and fire wardens and people who burnt back.
The burn-backs thing is a big thing.
Yeah.
Reducing the fuel load, and that's certainly, reducing the fuel load is a policy more tied with the right-wing, I guess, conservative side of politics, right? I feel like
no, because there's a myth here, right, that Greens want no fuel load clearing or something like that.
It is the fault of the Greens, isn't it? According to Barnaby Joyce, the reason for the New South Wales fires isn't climate change. The Greens have taken over Australia.
Want forest clearing as opposed to load clearing. They're two very different things, and they're being merged here into one. Forest clearing is where you cut down the forest, you make farming land. Load clearing is where you backburn to stop fires from coming through that forest.
The little bit that I know about it would indicate that it's backburning is not a policy that's favoured by more green.
But it is. It is because that's the evidence from scientists.
But can I ask? Does it matter what the fuck the Greens think, what they favour?
Yeah, when have they ever been in power?
I know, at the states, at the federal level, we've got Liberal governments in New South Wales and federal. So
sure.
What the fuck are the Greens doing?
No, but I think
the Greens didn't cut back the funding on fire wardens for the national parks.
Yeah, well, I guess just on that, like the load burning thing is a council or a municipal level type thing.
So every council in New South Wales, where the fires are happening, are Greens councils.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying, like where the Greens potentially fit in, or where people with more, quote unquote green political sort of spin
I'll
tell
you why I don't think that. Because Greens usually go, let's listen to the Aboriginal culture, and Aboriginals are at the moment saying, you should have our native fire practices, which I'm like, well, you did extinct a few species because of it, and you did make the country more arid because of it. I don't know if your practices, maybe a mix of that and science will be a bit better.
Look, it's an interesting one. The thing is, so let's talk about the fires. What I was doing a little bit of reading recently, and what proportion of fires are intentionally or are man-made, as in directly are lit by humans? Like,
I would guess 90%.
Really?
So
So we just had a conversation in the toilet about you were saying the New South Wales Uni head of
UNSW, from memory, head of the, I think it was the Centre for Climate Excellence, something like that.
climate excellence. Sounds a bit like it's run by the government. The Centre for Climate Excellence.
Mike, close to you.
Anyway, go on.
So his recent comment was there's no direct link between climate change and drought. And
I think the thing is we're getting to the point where it's Pascal's wager. You know, ever heard that Pascal's wager was that
No, what's that?
you live a good life so that if there is a God, when you die, you can go into heaven. Like it's not worth taking the risk because the consequences, if there was a God and there was a hell, are so bad. You're better off just living a good life to make sure you get through.
Yeah.
And we're almost getting to that point where we might as well do something. I mean, we still got cancers caused by the P2.5. What is it? 2.5 PM. So we're cleaning
the
up
shit
the
we've
air,
got now.
especially in Asia.
Yeah.
The stuff we're getting from the bushfires. So we're at that point where we might as well clean up the oceans. We're eating plastic coming through the fish. Might as well do something because otherwise it's going to be so bad, even if there isn't any climate change, that it's not going to be livable. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I would agree 100%. You know, I've got into fishing in this last year in a big way, and I love it. Absolutely love it.
We should go fishing sometime, man. I need to get some on the barbecue.
Absolutely love to. Yeah. And the funny thing is, like, Sydney Harbour is one of the meccas in Australia for fishing. It's that is a good news story right there. It was full of, we had anyway, without going too far down the rabbit hole, factories in Meadowbank producing Agent Orange during the Vietnam War.
You don't go fishing around Meadowbank, do you?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Well, if I do occasionally, I certainly don't take anything out of the water. I go straight back. But anyway, polluted, dioxins. They've put a big effort in. They've cleaned it up. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was.
I think you're right that Sydney Harbour in general has been a good story of environmental cleanup. That we got whales, seals, penguins coming back because of what we did.
I went fishing not long ago and there was a seal like just in the nighttime just popped up and it was swimming. But yeah, like there's fish stocks that were degraded in the 80s. The kingfish is a prime example to, there was hardly any around and now they're back in massive numbers and they're just growing bigger and bigger type thing. So there are some good stories out there. So I completely agree. Like, why trash the environment? We breathe, and science shows us like the.
I can answer that. Why trash the environment? Because it makes money. That's why we do it. The reason we dig mines. The reason we dig mines and ship the coal off to China is because it makes money. That's why you trash the environment. The reason Adani is happening is because of jobs. Because it'll create a lot of short-term jobs. And it'll, help India, who's obviously paying the government. It makes money.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough.
But other things make money, and if we mind,
it might not be as short term though. It's an easy way.
And that's a good point. Let's say you're the national federal election. Good example recently, Queensland, right? You've got people who are sitting there with no jobs or an uncertain future, and then or they've got the option of getting this mine, which is going to produce a lot of jobs and going to produce
short term though, because once the mine comes online, it's all automated.
Absolutely, but think if
then you just build another mine. You just keep building mines. Yeah.
If we did it like the way Norway mined their oil and then had a mining tax and kept that money in a reserve, and that reserve bought part of London the way Norway does it, then I'd be a little bit more happier about it.
Yeah.
But it seems like a lot of the funds go offshore, and it is like you're saying, it's a short-term solution to give some 18-year-old cowboy gets his second WRX or something like that working in the mines. You're like, yeah, it's great. They're getting jobs in the short term, but long term for the country, like,
And the
they're
world.
our as Australians, they're all of our resources. Probably Aboriginal people who have claims on the land, that's probably more so to them. We've had land titles abolished so that mines could go through, and like, how does that even happen? Like,
Money and corruption.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to disagree with that, but yeah, it might be.
it doesn't
might be an
always have to
18-year-old
be backwards and forwards here. Like, we can agree on the same thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Look, and I certainly don't, neatly fit into any school of thought or any politics. I look at things, on their merits, but it might be an 18-year-old cowboy who wants to get his second WRX, but at the same time, might be a dad with 4 kids. And his, I've got an uncle who's worked in the mines a lot, and he doesn't have much stable work. He goes and works in the mines occasionally, type thing. Like, without that. So, to your point, like, if you give the people the option, who are they going to vote for? They're going to vote for the party that will give them that short term, that will give them that security.
And
I
what
would
I was
say-
thinking
Up to
is
the
that the
leaders.
Liberals have pushed it the other way. Like, they've pushed people, they have to do that because they're cutting down on TAFE, they're cutting down on, like I was saying, the CSIRO, other things. Like, unless we go into mining, like, what are you going to do for a job in those areas?
Well, that's the thing, and you could do something. There could certainly be other options. Renewables. There could be farming. There's lots of different options, but that's where leadership comes in, because the people who are just trying to live their life day to day on the ground, they're not going to be able to make those decisions. They're not. It takes an injection of funds. It takes innovation. It takes allotment of capital. That takes time and so on, and that's sort of the thing with tying back to Greta Thunberg, where she's like, now, must. Does that message sell in the short term?
No, but do you know what
it's
that
hard,
is?
right?
This is not short term. So a couple of weeks ago, I looked up. Do you guys know who Ross Garnaut is? So Ross Garnaut, I think he was the head of the Reserve Bank at one stage. He's an economist, basically, a career economist. I think he worked for one of the political parties while they were in government as a chief economist. I'm pretty sure he was a Reserve Bank governor.
Right.
But he spent all his life studying, teaching economics. He gave a speech 10 years ago about the impacts of climate change and where Australia was positioned 10 years ago about what Australia needed to do to answer those questions around climate change and how we could progress our economy and move our economy from digging up coal and stuff to burn to make power. This was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I watched this speech like 2 weeks ago. Most Australians probably haven't seen this. It's on YouTube. You can look it up. But it's amazing hearing someone talk as an economist about what we need to do 10 years ago, and then listening to the response to that, which is our politicians who've done nothing in those 10 years. So Greta's not talking about let's do something now. We should have done something long ago.
Absolutely.
We've taken so long that the longer we wait, the harder. This is kicking the can down the road. When it comes to climate change, we're just kicking that can down the road. Kicking the can down the road. The road's running out. There's going to be no road left.
But
The can is going to stop.
What she's doing, from a change management perspective, is called a Hegelian dialectic. So a dialectic is, from Hegel's perspective, was that, okay, so think in the Victorian era, it was very conservative, sex was completely kaput, so that's very that way. And so we want to get to a middle ground.
They had
So
a lot of
during
kids. Someone must have been having sex.
During the 60s and 70s, we went through the flower power era where it was very loose. And then we came back to a better middle ground between it. So she's pushing it far so that we'll actually get some action to do something. So you've got to, from a change management perspective, it's like pushing it all the way. I've heard TV producers, and I can't remember the series, but they were saying they'd put like fuck, shit, this and that into the series, the clip or the episode, so that when it went through the censors, they didn't pick up the things they actually wanted to be in there. And it's that same sort of like pushing it all as far as you can.
The pendulum
so
swinging the
you
other
get
way.
it partly going your way? that
Yeah,
you want
sure.
to go?
Yeah. It's an interesting one. I had a very succinct and relevant thought, but I've completely lost it.
Let me one interesting thing I heard recently was about the
China. I've got it. Yeah, I've got it back. If I can just on that. See, the thing is, right? So it's global climate warming, right? It's not. And is it climate warming? I don't think we even use that.
Change.
It's climate change. Yeah. Okay. So it's a global thing, right? We don't exist in a closet. We don't. Every country is part of a whole. So China. So there was that recent thing, right, where Australia ranked last, as far as what was it? It was the European. Anyway, the index, whatever, the European Climate Index or whatever it was, Australia was last. I think the US was second last. Did you guys?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
China was something like 30, 40 places above Australia. India was fairly high up there. China increases their emissions each year by more than our total emissions. So what their current emissions are increasing each year by more than our total emissions type thing. So if we really wanted to do something, what about India, which was so much higher than Australia, right? So the Adani mine, but like you said, our coal all goes to India. They're the ones that are burning it. Or China.
But our emissions are 1.4% of the global emissions. That's nothing. But you've got about another 30 countries.
You might know this question though. One of the weird things I've always found about these studies is places like Australia, Canada, probably parts of Africa are probably quite unique in that we also dig up a fuck ton of our resources and export the problem to someone else to burn. So if we're digging up all the coal, when we dig up the coal, that counts as emissions, right? Because you're burning gas, diesel at the mine
to dig it up.
But then we're sending that coal to China, and China's burning that coal. That's actually our coal. That's our emission. But I don't think that gets calculated ever. I don't think.
So we should be changing the way that we do the
I just find it quite odd that we get to dig it up, we sell it, and we give it to someone else.
That's like charging.
And it's their problem.
That's like charging the gun shop owner with murder because someone bought his gun and shot someone.
Yes.
Back on?
Yeah.
So that's like charging the...
It's like, so we dig up the coal, we sell it to China, they burn it, we should be responsible for it. That's like saying, you own the gun shop, you sold him the weapon, you're going to be charged with murder.
So to that point, I'd say don't sell guns, make guns illegal.
Yeah, so you legislate that the gun... You have legislation that the gun owner should be responsible.
And guns obviously being an extreme example, but let's say someone who sells scarves and someone gets strangled. Okay, so don't sell scarves.
If we have a massive issue in Australia with people running around murdering people with scarves, I'd say ban all scarves.
Yeah, no, because you're specifically taking old carbon that was transfixed hundreds of thousands of years ago. So it's sun rays that came hundreds of thousands of years ago, and you're bringing them up. So if we were going to do some carbon accounting, I think it should be on Australia to offset it with forests or whatever. Somehow you're going to make a carbon sink and put it back. But if there was a global carbon accounting system.
It doesn't happen, and we get away with not having to worry about it. We've gone on
about this for a long while, and I honestly think that it's not going to get fixed by governments legislating stopping carbon or anything like that. I think it's going to be an engineering problem, and it's going to be scientists and engineers coming up with some way to transfix carbon from the atmosphere, whether it's like huge power stations, like a nuclear sort of system that just brings down.
Now there's something. Yeah. Why are we not using nuclear energy?
I think because we're on the cusp of solar becoming really economical. So
I thought that was the problem. Like nuclear takes 10 years to bring online.
Yeah, it's expensive to bring online. If you've already got a plant, like Germany's going to shut down a plant, that's a very bad idea because you've already It costs a lot of money.
Already.
But I've heard because it costs so much money, there's almost no nuclear plant in the world that's ever made money. What usually happens is governments put investment into it at a massive loss, sell it to a privatised company, then just has to run it, and that's where they can make money, but they're actually extremely unprofitable.
Look, I'm far from an expert on it. My understanding was that nuclear energy produces a shitload of energy, and
that's right.
Very clean.
And it's clean. And the thing is, like, Fukushima is
It's
a
not
Generation
clean.
2 plant.
You got waste.
Yeah, but the newer plants, they don't use rods, they use balls.
You got waste and
plutonium. And there's a way to dispose
well, that's
that.
the thing. You do have risk, but
I think the problem is,
Coal
I
plants
saw a
got
paper
risk.
in the past
CO2
few
emissions.
months where they've made solar cells 40% more productive. You've got 3D printers for solar cells in Mexico. So we're on that cusp of solar getting really cheap. You got Elon Musk saying we're going to have roof tiles that are solar cells, and then batteries.
And this is kind of like what I feel like maybe Australia missed, an opportunity in a country that had so much fucking sun.
Yeah.
If we had spent the past 10 years in developing solar technology, then maybe we make 1.3 emissions of the world, but we could be exporting instead of coal to the rest of the world. We could be exporting solar technology, renewable technology that we were leaders in. And this is something that Ross Garnaut kind of was pointing out, that we had a real opportunity to lead the way in innovation.
Well, we might have
missed that.
Yeah, well, maybe we have missed it from an economics perspective, but not from an emissions perspective, right? So that technology's out there, it's amazing. We didn't come up with it, we can't sell it, but we can use it.
But we're not really making the most of it now.
At the moment, yeah. But, and I guess that's Wayne's argument, we are going to, or it will be used, and therefore nuclear doesn't make sense, because is that what you're saying?
I'm saying, it takes a while to bring on a nuclear power plant.
10 years,
It's
a
expensive
well-planned
to produce,
nuclear plant.
and by the time we bring it on, it's probably going to be not as cost effective to run that as it is. Well, I'm sure, I don't know the running costs, but it's already almost obsolete, because think 10 years, what happened 10 years ago? The iPhone came out just a bit over 10 years.
The problem with solar, right, though, is it's not a 100% guarantee. What if you
No,
get
especially
we have fires and smoke, then
So
we're
we
fucked.
increase productivity, we have storage, we supplement it with wind, geothermal, stuff like that. But it's
You
about
need
doing the
battery,
research.
massive battery
You need
technology,
what you need
right?
is CSIRO funding to bring that innovative technology into Australia, and that's what we're missing.
That'd actually be interesting. So, Elon Musk put the battery in South Australia, a couple of years ago. I wonder what the battery technology would be like in 10 years. What's the sort of battery he can make in 10 years' time from now? And this is, again, this is the opportunity did we miss this? Here we're so lucky we've got someone like Elon out there doing this sort of research, making these steps and advances in this area. Why weren't we doing this? We could have been that country. We could have been doing it as a nation.
We weren't doing it because the Liberals wanted private businesses in Australia to do it. But private businesses don't make innovative technology. They chase their leads. They have a balance sheet and they go, we have a potential to make money off that.
You need really deep pockets to make it.
Well, when you think
Government.
there's a lot in the iPhone, there's a lot of innovative technologies, and I can't list them all, but a lot of them came from PhD research. I've read. So research for no reason, university research. So technologies that have come in because they just got the funding to research it,
right.
And then the innovation was found after they had the technology to do whatever it is, and that's what I feel we're missing out on.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Look, I certainly think that there's lots of opportunities. There's lots of things we could be doing better. At the end of the day, it's hard to, going back to the whole Greta thing. It's hard to ask people to cut immediately. People just are short-sighted. We're survivalists. That's who we are. That's what we do, type thing. And that's why you need a leader and someone who can look a little bit further and someone who can make those guided decisions.
But it's not about cutting everything at once. It's about making each decision each time and then making it better. I think cutting out the shopping bags at the store was about making a little bit of inconvenience so a couple of sea turtles don't wind up with a straw up their nose. Like making people think.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, do I buy a shopping bag or not? Is changing their mentality. So next time when they get a drink at a bar or whatever, they go, do I really need a straw? It's about creating that change of thinking.
Absolutely. And like to take an example, smoking, right? Smoking was hip, was cool, and then look at the slow trend, and there was resistance the whole way, and now it's sort of it's looked down on.
That's like, right. And smoking was interesting because when they said smoking's going to kill you, everybody's like, but it's good, man.
Yeah,
I don't give a fuck. But when smoking was going to hurt other people, that's when it became uncool. And maybe that's what Greta's doing.
But what if they said overnight, right, we're going to do plain packaging, we're going to put the cost of cigarettes up by 400%, we're going to make it illegal on transport, we're going to make it illegal indoors, we're going to make it illegal under any sort of cover. Like, imagine if they try to do that.
I would say good.
Well, sure. But
you would, because you understand.
70 years ago, there would have been a revolution.
And that's change management. Has to be a progressive process.
It's like prohibition in the States. You try and ban something that people really like, that is part of people's lifestyle, overnight, it doesn't work.
And the reciprocal is also
It's got to
true.
be gradual.
Bringing in self-driving cars, self-driving planes, is also has to be gradual as well.
Carrot's always better than the stick.
My grandmother tells me about when they brought in plastic and all her friends were freaking out because apparently plastic was clear, and they said everybody's clothes are going to be made of it. They're like, what? We're going to have clear clothes. But it's the same thing with AI, being able to do our medical examinations or stuff like that. Look, pretty much AI in the next 10 years is probably going to, in some form, control most of our life online through bank transactions, financing, and eventually it's going to drive our cars, it's going to drive our planes and do everything. And that scares the shit out of people right now. But eventually, slowly, people are going to say, oh, yeah, this is starting to get good.
Yeah, and I see that. I see that even in my work as a brewer, working in packaging, like AI, it's becoming a massive part of the plant to the point where it's taking over jobs that you might have needed a few people before to do. Now it can be done safer, and it breaks down. It's got problems, still not perfect, but it's becoming a lot better type thing. But it's gradual. Like it takes time. But yeah, and that's the thing. We as a race, we continue to change. We continue to evolve, and we continue to innovate. And I think that's what's going to happen. Like, I don't think overnight the climate's going to shit itself. We're going to all wake up dead in our beds, choked by smoke inhalation from fires that were 85% lit by human beings.
So, but people have always been afraid of change. In the Victorian era, there was
the Luddites.
A fear. Yes. But they banned patents for a short while on machinery because they didn't want to put the seamstress out of work because of sewing machines coming in. Like, there's always been this fear of them taking jobs.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, and there's probably people freak out about, we can't ban coal, we can't bring in renewable energy. That's we can. Should we do it overnight? No.
Probably not. I like having my fridge cold.
I like cold beer. But should it be done? Well, look, anything that we can do to improve the environment we live in, to make things... I remember we were talking about it earlier, the rates of cancer, it's insane. And that can be... We look at our air quality, we look at the things we eat. As everything's become industrialised, and... Is that healthy? Is that what we want in the long term? No, we're starting to see a pushback the other way with things becoming smaller and slower and, slow food movement and so on. But there's got to be a balance. I think that at the end of the day, that's what it's about, right? If you're on the extreme, no one's going to listen to you, no one's going to care, and it's not going to work. No policy that's too extreme.
Absolutely, and I think that has been the biggest problem of green movements like Greenpeace forever. That they have been too far on the extreme. They haven't gone, hey, hold on, you have to be gentle. Yeah. You have to slowly, like an old man getting into the bath. Ease them in there.
Yeah, but is that too late now? Are we getting to the point where we have to be extreme because we've kicked the can down the road, and what I was saying before, the end of the road is really close. and we can't do just a gradual sort of change. And if it's 10 years from now and we're having the same conversation,
I think
we're
you run on
fucked.
things like plastics, like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, plastics circling. Like plastics are everywhere. Antarctica, the birds are dying, whales are dying, fish are dying. That's pretty scary. Like we've got those stats of how much have we fished, like 90% of the ocean in the past, however long. We're hitting critical points for just ecology-based things.
The ocean, don't have to worry about the ocean because Japan's going to start dumping Fukushima water into the ocean. No one's going to be eating any fish. The fish will be fine.
But it already is dumping Fukushima water. You can, isn't it?
They're going to be dumping a lot more than what they're currently doing, man. So you don't have to worry about the fish. No one's going to want to touch the fish in like a couple of years.
We'll eat our factory cows and factory pigs.
But then we'll probably have fake fish.
Yeah.
Fake tuna belly.
How do you feel about I got from Hungry Jack's, the fake, what's it called?
Bunny.
The Rebel Burger?
Rebel burger?
Catching up. Thank you, Bonnie.
Yeah, it's called the Rebel Burger at Hungry Jack's, and it's a fake beef, and it's almost
like
exactly beef.
Does it taste almost like Hungry Jack's?
Yeah.
So it tastes...
It was probably better than Hungry
I was
Jack's.
going to say,
That's
if it tastes almost like Hungry Jack's, that means it tastes almost like fucking shit.
No, it was probably
So
better.
it's not
it was like
quite
a smoky,
shit. It's better than shit.
Yeah, it was better than...
It's better than
What's
shit.
the analogy about someone serving you a piece of toast with shit spread on it?
So Hungry Jack's
There you
has
go.
come up with a fake meat burger that tastes slightly better than shit. Congratulations, Hungry Jack's. Good work.
What is it? Is it soy?
Yeah, it's probably the texture is...
That's interesting.
But it's
because-
close. It's getting close. I have no problem with beef.
I have a big problem with Hungry Jack's. It tastes like fucking shit.
From a climate perspective, and it sounds like this whole talk is focusing on the climate. A lot of that science is around in the US. They've got feedlots where you've got all cows shoved in. It takes a lot of water, a lot of produce, a lot of water to grow the corn, and then the cows eat the corn, and then they fart, and they got all the methane. In Australia, we grass feed them. Like, it's actually creating a carbon sink. They're eating the grass, putting it back down. We're probably quite good in our ethics with cows in Australia, so I have no problem with Australian beef. I have a problem with overseas beef. Probably pork in Australia, factory grown pork is a bit bad, but let's not go down
Chickens?
that.
Another rabbit hole.
Yeah, chickens. Yeah, another rabbit hole.
Chicken hole.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've got a colleague. His wife's an award-winning journalist, and she's just gone. I think she's in the Amazon at the moment. Analogies aside, but yeah, she's doing a documentary on the clearing of the Amazon, and what they do is they plant soy crops. And they sell it all to China, but they're clearing shitloads of the Amazon, which is obviously
And they're old growth forests, so
old growth forests, and it's the lungs of the earth. It's and they're making soy, which is vegetarian, so a little bit more carbon friendly because there's no animals farting, creating methane. But at the same time, look what they're doing to do that, and they sell it all to China. And yeah, I know there's a lot of look. If
And the Brazilian president's response to Greta on the topic was she's a brat.
Well,
Of
I
course
mean,
it was.
I think he's pretty supportive of clearing the forests, to be honest. He's planning all the soy farms. But if we could flick a switch and go back to the 1600s, where we all lived in a small village, or 1400s maybe, and yeah, we can't. But we are kind of moving that way, though, to an extent.
I know a lot of countries, their growth rate
awareness.
is actually balancing. Not in Australia, of course, because our immigration's so high, but
Actual birth rate.
the actual birth rate is balancing out. I know in Thailand they need 2.3
That's
births.
the replacement rate.
Yeah, is the replacement rate, and they're actually well below that because Thai couples are having babies much later, or not at all, or that sort of thing.
Well, we spoke about Elon Musk and his ideas. His fairly recent one of his sort of tirades was that we're facing a population collapse. That's one of the crises
Mad
facing
Max
the
style.
world. Yeah, and I mean, you look at somewhere like Japan. it's sort of the demographic. Normally it's like that. Theirs is a bit more like that. And one of the problems is we're not going to have enough people. Anyway, that's another rabbit hole.
But that again, I've heard economists say, well, that's one way of putting it. But other economists have said, well, do we? Like, how much does it really cost for the old people? Like, they don't really do that much, like, to take care of them. I think it really do. And Australia scares me. I don't know if you've got any families in old age care, but it seems like Australia, we're pushing that you get the pension later. And after living in Asia, like Singapore and that, where you don't have any fallback, like there is a small pension in Thailand, but it's completely nothing. There's no way you could live on it. Even if you lived on the street, you couldn't get enough food for that. It just helps out with medicine or something like that. So they fall it back on your family, which I'm fine with. Like, I take care of my grandparents and all of that.
Sure.
But there's people who don't have family, and I'm scared that Australia's going to push into that way, and it's un-Australian to me. Like, the whole thing about the Australian ethos was fairness and taking care of your mate.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like the current governments are pushing that mateship thing as a propaganda, whilst actually pushing away any idea of mateship in its practicality. And what I mean by that is looking after your people. You got women who are in their late 50s, 60s on New Start. Shouldn't New Start by its name be for people under 30 or something like that?
Yeah.
But you've got people with disabilities waiting to go on to the NDIS, and they've got to wait for so long because they've got some disability, and all they get is New Start. Or you've got old people in their homes, and this just happened with me recently with my grandfather, waiting for his care package for over a year, and in that time his dementia's getting worse and all that sort of stuff. That's what really scares me.
Yeah, look, that's I think that's completely
What to do with the aging population and the enough young people to support them, or an economy to support them. Because generally, I guess economies are based
economically.
Well, economically, like our traditional economies have been based on increasing populations, increasing profits every year, and when your population starts like stagnating or going backwards, then you do have a real
So maybe
issue.
Immigration is a good thing. I remember
Hell yeah, of course.
10 years ago.
If we can't create enough people, unless we change the economic model, unless we change the model, which is always having...
That's capitalism though, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. You need increasing profits. You need an increasing population to support those increasing profits, increasing markets. That's why things like China open up and businesses blow their mind because they're like, oh, we've got 10, 20 years of growth now, locked in. Whereas before, they're hitting the limits of their current countries and the borders. Is like if there's not a huge population growth. So immigration's great.
So before I sort of ever thought that way, about 10 or so years ago, I was on a dive boat. One of the guys was from Shanghai, and it was a time when we had the Brisbane floods. And he said, oh, you got the floods now. You don't have enough population. How many do you have? I was like 22 million. Oh, that's not enough. You have these natural disasters. How are you going to survive? You need to double that, triple that. But it was the first time I've ever thought like
It's true.
that.
Like when I first went to Japan, I realised Australia is a tiny fucking country. We're big landmass, got no people here. We're a country town.
But do we have habitable places? Like
we waste so much fucking land in this country with our 3-bedroom houses and fucking massive backyards, a pool.
Yeah. Australia has high density population very badly.
Yeah. We've got so much space, and I'm just talking in the cities.
Yeah.
Get into the on the eastern seaboard, there is so much.
I don't know
land.
what was China like, because Singapore they do high density population. Like you get a nice building, you get a nice apartment, you got gardens downstairs, you got a big pool, playground for the kids.
So it's still
and
quite
in Sydney,
livable.
it's not.
Yeah.
So
sure. Yeah.
you got to go far to the bus and.
Yeah. Look, China lived in a third-tier city, right? So it was a little backwater. It was 7 million people. It was the size of Sydney, but it was considered a backwater type thing. And
it's double the size of Sydney, isn't it? 7 million.
Sydney's 7, isn't it?
I thought Sydney
something
was 4
like
or
that,
5. I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah,
anyway, thereabouts. But massive type thing. But does China do it well?
It's not whether they do it well. They just do it better than Australia.
Yeah, probably. Look,
We don't really do it.
When I say well, I mean comfort factor from your perspective.
Yeah. Look, one thing that disappointed me, I guess, living in China was the concrete jungle. It was everything was the same, and there wasn't the livability factor.
I think
like
that's what Singapore does well. They have good gardens.
Yeah, not so much in China. I mean, some of the newer sort of complexes weren't too bad, but there was
you can get noodles any time of the night.
Yeah. The street life was better than here, that's for sure. But look, I think that they've got a long way to go. But China's empty. I mean, China's like us. They're just all sort of sprawled around the coast.
So they can fit a lot more people in.
Oh yeah. The west of China is. There's 97% of China live in 51% of the area. 3% of China live in 49% of the area.
So the world should be fine so long as China starts having more kids. We can keep exporting more coal, more steel. Our economy will keep going. Don't live in China, just export more stuff to China.
Go live in Hong Kong. Yeah,
not there. To finish off with, cool. I want to tackle one more subject, a very strong, controversial one that's will be good for three guys. What do you guys think of the MeToo movement? Who wants to start? Total dead silence.
I'll go. I don't know enough about it. I wouldn't say that I have a really strong opinion of it on it. I would say that people like Harvey Weinstein, which he sort of seemed to be the instigator, the trigger, ground
the
zero
catalyst
for the whole thing. What a monster! There was a recent. You guys probably saw there was a recent. There was some sort of comedy thing in I think in New York, and there was young girls going up.
I heard
doing
this.
Sort of whole comedy presentation, and there's Harvey Weinstein just sitting there in the audience, waiting his criminal charges, or has he already got off them? I don't know.
He settled.
He settled, did he? Well, there we go. What a monster! I think that there's gross abuses of power, and I think there's an absolute imbalance of power across the world as a whole, and not just power, but finance But at the same time, like with anything, I think there has to be balance, and I think it can be taken too far. So if you look locally and you look at now I've got a mind blank. The famous actor in Australia, did
Hugh Grant.
No.
Karl Stefanovic.
No.
Alan Jones. Just trying to think of.
He was in court recently for the whole Me Too
Jeffrey Rush.
Jeffrey Rush. There you go. And so there was this big, sort of expose of Jeffrey Rush, and it was all caught up in the Me Too movement, and Jeffrey Rush is a criminal, and then it went to court, and he was completely abrogated, and all of the people that work with him were like, well, this has just gone over the top, and in the whole sort of feeding frenzy, it was like a piranha feeding frenzy. The Me Too movement snowballed, and there's perpetrators everywhere, and it just became a feeding frenzy, and then innocent people get caught up in it.
Rock and roll. Okay, so for the last topic, we've got three guys here, so I thought, what better topic than to discuss the Me Too movement? What's happened? Has it gone too far? Where is the pendulum at? Where was it? Has it swung too far? So yeah, what do you guys think of the Me Too movement? But first, cheers.
Cheers, guys. Look, for me, I think there's two sides to every story, and to start at the beginning, Harvey Weinstein, and I think I was mentioning earlier, but there was that recent sort of it was like a comedy night or whatever it was in New York City, and a lot of sort of young girls, young guys there, and he's just sitting there in the audience, and one of the girls got up and she was just addressed the elephant in the room, and she's just a massive fuck you to And
if you watch the video, you can't actually tell what's happening. You don't realise
Until
that
you get the
Harvey
context.
Weinstein is in
No,
the
you
room, but the
don't
way
see.
she's talking like she's a comedian, she's very cagey.
Yeah.
Like there's something weird going on.
and she's clearly a little bit sort of shaken by
Yeah.
the whole thing, as I would be if there's some guy's been accused of,
Did you watch that video?
yeah.
The weird thing was there was people defending Harvey Weinstein in
Well,
the
there's
audience.
people like saying "shut up" and
Yeah,
boo.
to her.
It's like what
Yeah,
the fuck,
yeah.
like. But yeah, what a monster! Like absolutely, like what a prick. And there's people, and then there's he's not convicted, but Prince Andrew at the moment, and Prince Andrew.
Prince Andrew, with Jeffrey Epstein. That
Jeffrey
just
Epstein,
just
the
just for the record, just so everyone knows, Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself.
Yeah. Well, that's probably another rabbit hole. I'd be interested to explore that again some other time. But that whole thing was really weird. But yeah, look, there's absolute monsters out there. Abuse of power, complete abuse of power, imbalance of power, and it's disgusting. I think people like that should.
Yeah, but that's interesting because the public supports that power. They support the power of celebrities. They support the power of oligarchies. I know in Thailand, just recently, the king made his official concubine. Official consort. And then 3 weeks later, kicked her out of the military, along with 4 other women that he removed their status as major. Like the oligarchy around the world has been doing this sort of thing, and just men in general.
That's
when they
actually,
have power.
That's an interesting point. I never really understood MeToo movement for one reason, because I don't know if anyone remembers, but before MeToo happened, Donald Trump admitted to sexually harassing women and got voted in by the American population.
And I talked to people online about that, and they were like, "Oh, but she let him do it." And I've had friends who had the exact same thing done to them. And it wasn't so much as them letting him do it as that they were just overwhelmed by what the fuck is happening right now. And then they were drunk, so there was just like a crazy thing happened to me at a party last night. But in reality, if you were sober and you're on the street and you went and did what he did, it's completely horrific.
But you'd probably get away with it as a man. That's the issue. You'd probably get away with it.
Well, yeah.
If you went around, as a guy, even in Australia, I reckon if you went around grabbing women by the pussy.
Hold on. So there's also a gender difference that sexually men would like to be targeted and women are targeted, but perhaps there's an imbalance there to start with.
That's a biological thing.
But without going into that, you just don't do it, mate. Like as a man, I know you, Jack, that you wouldn't go up to a woman and just grab them on the pussy. But here's the thing. This is the problem with those jokes. And Clementine Ford has said this, that every man who has committed rape or that has laughed at a sexist joke. And I didn't get it for like more than a year. And I just tried to, and I said, no, people who commit rape and that sort of a thing, they're mentally insane. Like they have a chemical imbalance in their head. And then I realized, hold on, people who do have mental problems have triggers. And the things that could trigger them to go, yeah, it's okay, is that sexist joke or that thing that Trump said, it's okay to grab him on the pussy. And that's why it's not okay, because it could trigger some other rape to happen because of that guy who was mentally just on the edge of insanity.
I don't think it's that extreme. I think it sets a discourse in the public that just makes that acceptable. So by Trump, by voting in a president who sexually harasses women, you're just saying this is fine. There's nothing wrong with this.
Absolutely for them, but for us, we look at Trump saying it is a bit of absurd, right? Like,
Imagine also, like you guys have got boys, right? Imagine the impact that has on young boys seeing a president voted in,
but
sexually harassing women.
Oh, absolutely. I
and
think
how you navigate that and teach them that, no, that's not cool. That guy's an arsehole. But also that arsehole just happens to be the president of the free world. Right.
Well, look, I think that potentially that's oversimplifying it. Just in that he wasn't voted in on
grabbing pussies.
Yeah, right. Does this guy
In
grab
spite of
pussies,
it.
doesn't he? Like,
Just people just didn't give a fuck.
well,
yeah,
I think
but it's
like
again, that's
part of
that
a
appeal
whole.
to
It's
authority.
like-
So the guy in authority is doing it, it's okay.
And that's the
Yeah.
real
Oh,
danger
it-
for me with it was when someone
Yeah,
in authority
it's
does it, and
despicable.
it makes it normal. And it's like, what hope does any woman have? And the women's movement has come so far, and I feel very sorry for them because I'm like they came so far, but now. I think as men, a lot of men feel like the pendulum swung the other way, and now we're all on edge. Can you kiss someone on the cheek, and can you give them a hug? And some older men, can you slap them on the ass and all that sort of shit? But they're feeling very. They're feeling very. As men, we're feeling very targeted. That you can't do anything anymore. Well, what the fuck were you doing in the first place? You know, that you can't do.
Yeah, you got to question why did you want to do it?
Yeah, what were you doing? You know, what was the issue? But I hear this a lot that, for example, that there was that comedian, Louis C.K., who he was jacking off in front of his female comedians that he was like producing their shows and stuff. And he was, there's like the cancel culture. So he was cancelled for a couple of years. So he lost his Netflix series and he wasn't getting booked any shows. And there was a lot of comedians like kind of supporting him saying, was it really that bad? He was just jerking off in front of some girls,
Sounds fairly intense.
He didn't go to jail, and there's always that thing, presumed innocence. If it hasn't gone to court and they haven't been proven guilty, then did it really happen?
Which is one of the pillars of, of our justice system. But look, I at the same time, I think we live in a highly sexualized world.
Yeah, I think the problem is you can look at it two ways. When we're looking at it right now, we're looking at it objectively, and that seems fucking ridiculous. But when you look at it, like if you were to bring that up with 5 mates, some of them are a bit loose, you've had 10 beers, and then you're all laughing at that, then it's starting to normalize over-sexualizing women, and it's different, right? And then so it's starting to create those neural pathways of like, it's okay to be a bit lured.
Yeah, but even, let's say like in the cold hard light of day, there was a town in Australia, I think it was in Queensland somewhere recently, and they said we're going to be pornography free type thing. Like we don't want any
Queensland.
pornography. Yeah, so I think it was Queensland. Banana benders. But yeah, but like...
How do you do that?
Ban the internet?
Well, yeah.
Take
or
everyone's
just,
phone off them?
Pretty hard restrictions on, I don't know, like all the providers. But yeah, like, I mean, you look at like pornography is so normal, and a lot of sort of pornographic directors are saying that like really hard pornography is becoming even more normal type thing. And then we've got a growing problem with rape and...
Is it
like, are they
growing though?
completely
Is the problem with
I'm not
rape
sure of the
growing,
stats
or is it just
on
that it's more
Domestic.
reported?
More reported.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I would
I'm
actually
not
say,
sure.
I reckon it's underreported. I reckon there's a lot of
Oh,
women that
probably.
still think, like, what the fuck is the point?
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
probably. Or
Yeah,
just you
I don't know
wouldn't
the
rather-
data
I think
on
it's
that. Yeah, I mean, I've had friends.
Is that battery?
Yeah.
Battery?
I've had friends who've said to me they've pretty much been raped and never reported anything.
I would agree. It's probably very...
So it's been hot. Hey.
Yeah, look, I'd agree. I'd say it's probably very... I mean, if I went... Bushfires.
Anyway, let's get back into MeToo. So we were discussing where do we
We end up.
where do we end up? We were talking about.
Oh, you were telling us about how you touched a woman that time.
No way. It certainly wasn't.
No, so
I've
That
touched
was a
many
bad
women
joke.
from a distance.
Did I just do this? Did I just do it?
You normalised it.
I
You just normalised it.
we were
right?
talking about people.
And this
in
is what I
power,
was saying about men
People
and
in power
drinking and making
normalising.
jokes, and it does normalise it, right? But when we're both fathers, we're both in our day-to-day life, we would never make a joke like that.
No,
Yeah.
this is true. Yeah. But yeah. Go down.
So we're talking about people in power, normalising the situation and setting a terrible example. And I brought up the example of Louis C.K. And like there's the extreme cases of Harvey Weinstein, which everyone says is a monster, even though I think he got off recently by paying a fuck ton of money. I don't understand how you can get off, so it means it must have been like not a criminal charge.
Well,
it must have been
civil.
a civil
Yeah.
for him to get off. So and
So
that goes.
is
That
that
goes
statute of limitations is passed and
No, that's separate. If statute of limitations had passed, which I don't think it does for serious cases, and I don't know how it works in the US, but there would be no case to answer at all. If it's a civil case, someone brings something against you, you say to them, hey, I'll pay you a shitload of money,
Right.
and they're like, yeah, cool, done.
But the reason it would be civil in the first place is what evidence do you have to mount your case for it to be criminal,
I think
right?
hold on. Isn't the point of this
The US is a bit weird.
is a principle thing? I mean, these women who are coming out with it aren't going to be bought, right? Like,
Well, the problem with that is if it's civil, like, what's the penalty? Like from Harvey Weinstein, from their perspective, if they're taking him to court over a civil matter,
So
what's
they're
the
just
worst?
trying to fuck him.
What's the worst case that can happen?
Yeah.
He's not going to go to jail if they win the case.
Actually, yeah. So it could be statute of limitations for criminal, so that could have passed. Or the other thing is it could be insufficient evidence for a criminal trial because the burden of proof for a criminal trial is much higher than for a civil. So
Right.
it's beyond reasonable doubt, whereas for a criminal trial it's beyond reasonable doubt. For civil it's on the balance of probabilities.
Right.
That's here. Is it the same in the US?
And that's
Probably
kind
something
of my
similar.
point to why, like, you know, guys can just go around grabbing pussies all over the street so long as there's no video evidence. Like, how do you get criminally prosecuted for something? Like, how could you get criminally prosecuted for sexual harassment? What evidence would there need to be? Like, for one, I'd imagine you probably need a witness would probably help.
No. Well, look at the George Bell example. That was 30 years ago. No witnesses.
I've got no idea how that. I've got a bet with a mate that I'm betting $50 that the High Court appeal is going to get him off.
As someone who's studied and practiced a bit of law, that whole case jars me because it doesn't sit right. Because how do you get convicted when there's no corroborating evidence whatsoever aside from one single person saying this happened 30 years ago?
And this is kind of my point. The
Yeah,
evidence
look,
you
you
need
probably-
to prosecute
you
any of these
probably win your
cases,
bet.
whether it's rape, whether it's sexual harassment, the evidence you need.
And there's a reason for that, right?
There's a reason why guys keep doing this, because we get away with it, because you need so much evidence. I don't think the kind of guys that do this are that fucking dumb. Or no, or maybe not the guys. The lawyers
Let's just
representing
question
them.
for a second, why do guys do it? Like, why would anyone do something like that? And it comes along...
Power, exerting
to
power
a certain
over
extent.
someone. Over
It's
someone.
along the same lines of...
Biology.
To a certain
Don't you think we're animals?
Yeah, I do. And I think men are
it's
driven
power.
by some primal force, which are the same as why do we take drugs? And I think it's they don't feel income.
Shout out to the bread gang, but I think the reason we take drugs is to become the loosest city in Australia. Yeah.
I think, and there is research on other mammals where they've gone, where you take the water with cocaine, or I'll give you this rat fun park, and then they stop taking the water with cocaine. I can't remember if it was cocaine or opium, but it's because they've got problems in their lives in general. It's being in showbiz is very high pressure. Like, why are you building these people up to fail, sort of thing? I mean, that's not something.
So you
that
think
can
it's
be
like
solved.
something to do with the ego and how much.
I'm
not excusing it. I'm saying
stardom
society
or-
in general is causing
Why do people, I guess the question is, why do people abuse other people, right? Whether it's men sexually abusing women, whether it's more powerful people sexually, or not sexually, but financially, or physically.
I guess that comes down to power. Like they don't, probably in most of these guys' lives, they don't have good, strong relationships with women. I imagine most situations, like Trump. Trump as an example. Do you think Trump has a great relationship with his wife?
No, I feel so sorry for her. She just wanted to marry a rich guy and cruise through the rest of life, and now she's fucking there making speeches and shit. Like, she didn't sign up for that.
But honestly,
Seems
do you
to love
think if Donald Trump had a good, strong or lots of good, strong relationships with women around him, he'd be grabbing women on the pussy and bragging about it? I think it comes down to there's a combination of power and really poor relationships with other humans.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'd say that goes with men as well. Like if he had good, strong male models during his life, would he be doing despicable or would anyone? I feel like people that.
So the answer to your question, I think, is relationships with other people and
it's interesting. What you're saying is making me understand. You know how they say, "Oh, men need to change," and of course, as a man, you're like, "Fuck, what do I need to change?" Like, and you get a bit of affronted. It's like the old people with Greta. Like, listening to it, I sort of get it more. Like, it's the whole ecosystem of men and how we upbring our sons, our friends, all of that.
But I don't feel attacked by that because I've been in situations where I should have stood up and should have done more, and I haven't. Most of the times because of power. I've been in situations where I've had like a very senior male manager make some really inappropriate comments, and there's no way I'd fucking talk back to them because that might be my job.
Yeah.
If it was the flip side, like I've spoken to people where I've been a manager and I've had to talk about someone under me who's done something inappropriate, and that was fine. But when you don't have the power and someone senior is saying something inappropriate, that's talking truth to power up is really hard. Doing it down is fucking easy. You can get the fuck out of here, slap them around. Yeah, metaphorically speaking.
But I don't think that slap them around thing is it's like too much. It doesn't help from a change management perspective.
No, but when you see someone do something wrong and you tell them this is wrong, that's much easier to do when you're in a position of power and they are subservient to you.
Yeah, but it allows that guy to go, fuck that guy, he was wrong. But you get what I mean? Like, so I create a front and I say, fuck him, I'll keep doing what I was doing. So anyway, I was talking about kids with a guy who was pretty much on my level. Maybe he was my boss at work. And I was saying how we were talking about having boys or girls, and this Irish guy in Thailand, and it was much funnier coming from an Irish guy, but he said, boys will wreck your house and girls will wreck your head. And he said, oh, that's probably right, but it's quite sexist. And I was like, oh, I was taken aback, but when the Irish guy said it, it was all funny, we all laughed. And then I realised, yeah, it probably is, because it's saying that all sex is the same.
But is that a male perspective though? And like, would an Irish woman have said the same thing?
Potentially, but then we're going into sociology there. It's like, groups of people with a consciousness and.
Well, not even necessarily consciousness, but a different perspective on things. I think as men, we don't necessarily understand women as well as women understand women.
Yeah.
And so an Irish man may say that about women wrecking his head, but I don't think an Irish woman necessarily would say that.
But I think that's like I saw,
you know what I'm saying.
saw this comedian talking about, he was an Arab Australian comedian, and he was saying a lot of people say what I'm saying about white people is racist. Right. But it's because I'm coming from that perspective, and I think it's that perspective thing again.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And it is all perspective based.
Which I don't think is fair. I don't think you should be able to just say what you're saying because you're coming from that perspective. Shouldn't we all be on the same?
We can't be though.
That's an interesting topic. Then you get into like the American,
I probably said that wrong. But
I shouldn't
be given free license.
Yeah.
Like there should be a fundamental underground truth. No,
but part of this does tie into free. Anyway, look, another can of worms. Free speech. Like let's not go down that rabbit hole. But look, at the end of the day, you want people to be able to express themselves, right? You don't want people.
And this
an
is
extent,
probably
no matter how
common-
fucked up their thought or perspective or whatever it is, you want them to have an avenue to express it. You can, potentially look at how you restrict that avenue. You don't necessarily want to broadcast extremely radical or harmful or hateful ideas.
But
you
say
do want
the
people-
manager or a guy in a workplace having a friendly joke with his female colleague about like I don't know some sexist joke that he heard and he thinks is really funny and he shares it with her and she doesn't do anything because she doesn't find it funny, but it's just kind of like you just don't react.
I think,
But it's
there's this whole
uncomfortable.
thing- yeah, no, sure, and
But yeah, talking about like,
Uncomfortable
people in the workplace and the way they interact with each other, and like one guy might say something to a female colleague that, is inappropriate, but he doesn't think it is, or he doesn't see how it is inappropriate.
I think you
it's a
hold
fine
back
line,
and you
isn't
just
it?
don't do anything sexual in the workplace. Fuck it, do sexual things with your mates and your partner, but just leave it out of the
Yeah,
workplace.
but also there's
People-
probably guys, and this goes back to what I was saying, that there's people in society that don't have really good relationships with other people, and maybe the only sort of relationship, social interaction they have is in the workplace.
Like The Office.
I never watch.
Yeah,
I only watch the UK Office, and I haven't seen it in such a
It's
long
essentially-
time.
Yeah, same thing.
But there's people that
Right.
probably in those situations they got really poor relationships, probably really poor role models when they're growing up. And they're falling through the cracks, and they don't have power, and so they say really inappropriate shit, or they act really inappropriate. They do something really inappropriate. And I feel like
and ethics in high school.
philosophy. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, ethics. Yeah.
I think education would solve a fuck ton of the problems that we have in the world right now, but we are pulling back from education.
Yeah. Well. Education standard is not in a great way. It hasn't been for a long time, but it almost seems, if anything, it's dropping around the world, and social media doesn't seem to help that. And we're talking about technology and innovation, and mental health, and where does social media fit into that?
But I think social media is really good because I think it's helping people create a platform to communicate and talk about these issues. But at the same time, it does also create bubbles.
I remember
It
20
does
years
create
ago
bubbles.
when they were saying, the cool thing, everybody is a journalist, everybody is a media creator, but the problem is everybody is a media creator. Even the fucking morons and the idiots and the conspiracy theorists and people with mental disorders. Not just the people who are geniuses and have something to say.
But during that time, media corporations have cut funding to journalism. So the people they're employing are fucking idiots and morons. And the quality of media in that time has gone down and pulled back and pulled back.
Yeah, I've heard people say that. Like, have you ever had knowledge on a subject and then something happens and a journalist covers it and you realise, hold on, they don't know what they're talking about, and then you realise the journalists in general are just making do with the information they have.
Or have you ever fact-checked a subject that you've read about? When you read a news article and they say something happened, this happened, and then you go and fact-check it. You go through the article and you search all their sources and you realise, this is bullshit.
Or if you've just read news articles in general with a basic knowledge of the English language and you find grammatical faults everywhere, strewn through almost every single article I
But
read.
this comes back to most Australian voters in general don't know how the human race disseminates knowledge. And what I mean by that is how we make academic articles, how we reference, how we spend a week reading 32 journal articles just to find 2 paragraphs of text in an article, that sort of a thing.
I saw
don't understand referencing.
I saw actually a YouTube video today which was commenting on a 7:30 report thing about the Quiet Australians and searching for who the Quiet Australians are. And it was so fucking depressing. I'm so happy I did not watch that 7:30 report because one of the Quiet Australians was complaining about Bill Shorten wanting to implement electric cars, and that was the thing that lost the election for her. She was like, it's just this airy-fairy electric car bullshit. Another Quiet Australian was like, Scott Morrison goes to church. He's a Shark supporter. and there was some other bullshit.
That's,
I'm just
that-
like,
that's what
and
I was
I'm just
saying.
like, I was
the
like,
Australian voter
oh
is a
my-
populist
oh
voter.
my
He only
fucking
votes
God.
based on like
I was-
haircuts and shit like that.
I was like, oh my, these people are fucking morons. Sorry if you're watching, if you any quiet Australians out there, fucking morons. Dead set fucking morons. Like, to base your vote in a democracy off this utter bullshit. Not policy. Not one of these so-called quiet Australians had any policy
But when you
perspective.
say the quiet Australians, you're meaning the people that got more than 50% of the vote.
I'm meaning what 7:30 went out and tried to find examples of
what
quiet
you gonna-
Australians.
But then when you look at
they're
people
not
on the
wa-
other
they're
side...
not watching
like,
the 7:30 report. No one who... I
They're
mean,
probably the good part of
it
the quiet
seems to
Australians.
be, and I'll just say that ABC and SBS seem to be a certain generation, or a certain type of person watches them. Maybe they've got a bit of an education. The people who don't watch them are out boating and fishing and just enjoying the Australian lifestyle.
Watching Married...
and they
what's
just
it?
don't give a fuck.
Married
I
at
lived
First
with this
Sight?
Married at
guy.
First Sight, yeah.
I lived
don't
with this
know.
guy 20 years ago. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was 15 years ago. Anyway, he came from France, and he got his job door to door knocking to sell. He said, "Look, all you have to do is sign this piece of paper. Cost you nothing, and you get 50% green energy guaranteed." How good is that? He knocked on this guy's door, and he's like, "Give the spiel. All you got to do is sign here, 50% green energy." And the guy said, "Nah, she'll be right, mate," and shut the door. And he was like, "What?" And he had to knock again and say, "Excuse me, sir, who is she?" like he couldn't comprehend how this guy just wouldn't want to get it. And I think that's the standard Australian voter. They just don't give a fuck.
We're dumb fucks. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're the king.
This is democracy.
They're
So
the
this
king.
is what I was getting to. It's an education thing. And
Yeah,
who's
I
educating?
agree.
It's people like Greta.
Yeah.
So we need more people like Greta
I-
who are
I
able
totally
to
agree.
promote that message. Even if they don't fucking like it,
But
at
Greta's
least
just
they're
a loud
ticking over.
mouthpiece.
It's wiring
But
those,
we
those
need more
brain cells.
loud mouthpieces like Greta in a place where education has failed us so massively. And the reason I think things like Trump has happened, the reason I think so much right-wing activity has happened, like Scott Morrison getting in, when someone can vote on him because he goes to church and he's a fucking Shark supporter, that's your criteria?
No, absolutely. But on the flip side of that, I feel for, like, when you see, you know, the Labor front benches come out on the eve of the election and post a photo, you know, "We're ready." Like, they're all there in their sort of pose, like, you know, we're ready for power type thing. That sort of take it for granted thing. People like, fuck you. Like,
Absolutely,
we have
yeah.
a tall poppy culture in Australia,
Yeah.
which I
They
love.
missed it.
Which I love in some ways.
Absolutely.
And in some ways, it's not great because people. It stops people
But
from
we've
thinking.
had
They just do.
we've had
But-
years of corruption by the Morrison government, and people just totally forgot about that because of the mainstream media. Just
Not the
one
Mor- not
Trump
the
just got
Morrison
fined
gov-
$2 million.
Well, he's not
Hello
Morrison.
World, Palladium, the Murray-Darling scheme.
Well, that wasn't I'm saying not Morrison, like Liberal.
That's
Shaw,
the
Morrison.
federal Liberal government.
Oh, you're
That
saying,
is the
right,
federal
you-
Liberal
You're saying
government.
not. Yeah, but has Labor been any better? I mean, look
They're
at
not
Labor,
in power.
Labor New South Wales.
No. Hang on a second.
No.
Has Labor been any better? They can't be better if they're not in power. They're not the ones committing the corruption. If they get in power
Well,
and
the
they
whole-
start committing corruption,
The whole
ICAC,
sure,
The whole
sure.
ICAC thing in
Yeah.
Sydney with Aldi bags of money.
To federal Labor,
Yeah, ICAC.
federal or state.
I think that was state. But I'm just saying, like, Labor, you can't sort of separate state and federal.
Well,
I
you
mean,
can. They're two different.
yes,
they're
yes,
two
yeah,
different
absolutely.
entities.
You absolutely can, but people don't make that clear-cut distinction, right? People see. So, what's the most popular state in Australia? Obviously, it's New South Wales. There's so many things I dislike about our current government. There's so many things I dislike about our current system.
Yeah,
It's-
exactly. There's this
it's
party
a
called the
mess.
Flux Party, and their whole thing,
Flux.
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 And the whole thing is,
Federal party? Or?
yeah, so every vote in the Senate will go to an app. And you can, so every person who has the app and signs up can vote. But if you go, well, look, I don't know anything about resources, or I don't know anything about physics.
Yeah.
You can go, okay, nuclear energy, I'll send it to my
what your main-
my mate who's got a PhD in physics.
Ah.
So you can offload your votes to people who you know things in that industry.
But you only get one vote.
No, but every bill that gets passed through Parliament, you get to vote on, and whatever the outcome is of the app votes on the app,
Yeah.
the member in the Parliament votes the way that the public has told him
Oh, so
That's
the Flux
interesting.
Party is guided by
the app.
So it's
So the people voted in are just puppets
so open
for
to
the app.
abuse, though, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Depends how you depends how you regulate the app.
You'd have to secure it pretty hard, yes.
Based on the electoral system,
and
right?
you have to have-
It'd be based on the electoral system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Or but
That's the way you would secure it.
Well, I know because I think you're saying this is post-electoral.
Oh yeah, but you'd still use the electoral roll somehow.
Right. But then at the end of the day, you wouldn't want quiet Australians, or you wouldn't want people that like sharks, or you'd want thinking people to be
Yeah,
Or-
I think
or you
the
just-
idea
or you
is
just
that every
educate people.
Australian would have a
educated
device,
people.
and for every vote, they could say, "I'm going to vote
So
on
every
this." or I'm-
Australian has a direct say in every bill. Interesting.
But they can offload their say to someone who they know has more knowledge. So it reduces the need for parties.
What about where money comes into it?
Yeah.
Lobbying and so on. I don't know. I love the idea, but it sounds like it would need to be pretty well thought out and pretty
Well, these are the sort of people he should get on his thing. Yeah. That guy versus the science party guy.
And that's the idea. So what I'd like to do with this, once I've got the kinks, like why the fuck does my camera keep like stopping every 10 minutes and get the sound affected.
Yeah.
I'd like to invite like smaller parties because one of the things I think is in Australia.
the science party guys on my Facebook. They're pretty approachable.
No, I approached them before. Like I approached all the smaller parties like 10 years ago to do something like this, and everyone was keen because
Really?
they don't have a platform.
But I think what's happened in the past couple of years is that there's been an explosion of minor parties as well.
Yeah.
Although
But
I
it's
feel
not
like
that
it's
they just
come
never
and gone.
they just never had a platform.
Yeah.
Almost. But they never had a platform, and
Right.
so what I'd like to do with this is like you've got Q&A,
Yeah,
which is Liberal,
Yeah.
Labor, Greens.
Occasionally a bit of Greens.
What's the Pauline Hanson?
One
Occasionally
Nation.
they have some One Nation
that.
nutter,
Yeah, right.
and then there's like tons of fucking like at the state, at the
randoms.
federal level. There's tons of other smaller parties that there's no real political debate between them.
But they don't include them. Yeah.
Yeah, they just don't get included. This is what I want to do with this.
Independence
I want to
and
build this up to get this smaller political parties on a regular basis debating current
It's
topics so
awesome.
people
Yeah,
start
yeah.
realising what the fuck they actually stand
Yeah,
for.
yeah. No, absolutely. Because, but yeah, like most people only they get to election day, they rock up at the poll, they read a little bit.
I
and
did.
they're like,
I got to election day. I looked at the massive fucking shit. I'm like, I ain't got no idea who the fuck most of these parties are. I got no idea what they really stand for.
exactly. So who
Yeah.
do you vote for in the
Nah, I
Senate
know.
anyway?
Yeah. Exactly. You just fucking.
And then after you do that, you got preferences. Like,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You get people
Forget
like
about
One
it.
Nation and all of that coming in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to get them in eventually and do like regular debates with smaller parties. Get people on from Twitter. You've always got these political people on Twitter that are very vocal. Get them included and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Bring me back if you get Malcolm Roberts.
He's he's too mainstream for me.
Sounds familiar.
He's the One Nation guy who goes, no, that NASA is corrupting the data.
And then I could have like a small studio audience here. Give them like tomatoes and shit.
Rotten eggs. Yeah.
Cool.
That's
All right.
great.
Well,
Awesome.
so this was our first pub test at the Wild Rover with Wayne and Jack. I hope you guys might be had a fun time, had a few beers, enjoyed yourselves. There was no punches thrown, which is always good. No beer thrown or spilled or lost, which is always better. And maybe you guys will join us again sometime to talk about some other current topics happening around the world or in Australia or in your backyard or in the pub. Cheers.
That'd be great,
Cheers
man.
later.
Sounds
Thanks.
good. Cheers. Thank you.
Rock and roll.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Dad.
That was good. I'd do
was
it
good,
again
yeah.
one time.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. Appreciate
That was
it. Really
good, man.
appreciate it.
Yeah, no, not at all. No,
Happy
no,
to get you guys
no, it's-
drunk and talk about shit.
Yeah.
Let me buy you a beer and then we'll go home.
Yeah.
Are you guys hungry? I'm
Oh,
going to go to the place up the road.
Not
How far is
massively,
that?
but what place?
There's a place up the road that has like really cheap jerk chicken.
Is it
on
good?
Monday. Oh, it's really good.
Only if you let me buy.
Sure.
Alright.
It was like 11 till 1 a.m. or something on, and I just play obscure records and stuff like that. But anyway, if you've got a recording, you can go to like say Ride Regional Radio, and this was like 10 years ago, so we'd take a mini disc, but you can take it in and just get it on air pretty easy. Yeah.
Really?
And then when it passed like 1 or 2 a.m. They record shows onto VHS because it can run for like 6, or you can get 9-hour cassettes and they just record audio on it. But yeah, you should think about doing that.
I don't care about old media, man. This is YouTube. This is like new media. Why would I want to put this on radio? It's dead.
This will be old
Radio
media too.
is fucking dead.
We'll have like chips in our
Yeah,
brains.
I
soon.
tell you why.
this
Because
is
you know
one-
what you're combating? You're combating the 2 a.m. talkback, and it's about that change management.
2 a.m. You're fucking.
The guys on talkback, because
Man,
that's the
I'm
only
gonna-
fucking time slot they're going to give you.
Yeah, but I'm not battling 2 a.m. man.
No, but what I'm telling you, battling changing minds, and those guys are like
Oh.
going through the dial
So
at 2 a.m.
I need to find
They
the
can't
randoms at
sleep.
2 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay, I got what
And then
you're
they
saying.
go tell Barry down the pub, hey, you should have heard what I was listening to these blokes the other day.
On the truck.
It's a fair point. So I still need to cater for the old media, even though I think they're going to be dead in several couple of years.
Oh yeah, and transcribe it into a book.
And
I hope you don't get home and there's just nothing. There's just audio, and he's like, "Fuck it, we're an audio podcast."
It's going to the radio. It's going to the radio.